Same topic, wasn't it? Concept of God. Okay, so we'll concentrate more on concept of God in Jainism. But before that, because I take more interest in that philosophies and what happened in ancient times, how the other civilizations view concept of God, what they are thinking about God. So I'm going to share few things with you, and then we'll move on to concept of God in Jainism. Okay, so let's begin with what people were thinking in ancient time or older days. Natural forces which helps you survive. These were the main points of topic during those days, 7,000, 8,000 years ago. Assyrian civilization, Mesopotamian civilization, Babylonian civilization, Iranian, Zoroastrian civilization. What people were thinking that, oh, we eat, we drink, we breathe. How does it all happen? Where it comes from? Who gives all these things to us? And there were natural forces which could harm you. And they used to call angry gods, which are the famine, thunder in the sky, lightning, excessive rains, floods, earthquake. They were really afraid of all these things, and they thought that there is some supernatural or divine hand which does all these things. And at the same time, they thought that there is some supernatural divine thing which gives us food, energy, light, and all these things. And that's how we survive. So the first God was more or less in each and every philosophy, in Assyrian philosophy, in Mesopotamian, Zoroastrians, and even Hindus. They believed in the sun god, Surya, because we know when sun rises early morning, suddenly there's a light in the sky, the whole earth is illuminated. You can light millions of divas, but you cannot compare the light of sun. Within few seconds, the flowers bloom and all these things happen. So they thought this is something like a miracle, and that's the God. So the first God was sun god. They used to worship sun. And men, of course, felt helpless during night time. They could not see anything, they could not work properly. So sun was the only thing. He was thankful to some and was scared of some of the events. How he then started worshipping these forces. The first god, now the Sumerian god, they call him Utu, sun god. Assyrian people, they worship Ashur, and their goddess was Ishtar. And of course, sun god was also there, they call it Shamash. And Zoroastrian, we all know, they worship fire. Again, because that idea of worshipping fire came from the idea of sun, and they worship the god which is called Ahur Mazda. Ahur is again the same name appear in Assyrian philosophy, Asur. And Zoroastrian called them Ahur, like a Sindhu and a Hindu, S and H interchange. And Mazda, the Mazda car. That comes from this name, Zoroastrian name actually. Yeah. Because that was the Zoroastrians' first fire god, Ahura Mazda. And that's how they borrowed this name, Mazda car. So these are the early gods, so to speak. And they all worship sun. Now, you can see this name, Assyrian god Ashur. Slowly that name came towards India. And Indian people, more than 5,000 years ago, they also believed in Asura gods. But then the philosophy changed. And they had their own name. Sur means all devas, all gods. And Asur means all demons. Bad gods, so to speak. So they believed in Sura and Asura. But that the word came originally from Assyrian civilization. Ahura Mazda, Zoroastrian god, as I said. And there are 3 words underneath. You can say Humat, Hukta, Hukrusta. Very interesting. These words are. If you go to Zoroastrian Center in Renas Lane, opposite Renas Lane, more or less opposite Renas Lane station, in the hall, on the main wall, you know, right on the top, these 3 words are there. Humat, Hukta, Hukrusta. Humat means good mind, Hukta means good speech, and Hukrusta means good conduct. Isn't it amazing? Man, vachan and kaya, mind, words and deeds. And that came in again 7,000 years ago. Humat, Hukta, Hukrusta. And again, there's similarity. Those who learn languages and take interest in languages, you know, this is very interesting. So much similar in Sanskrit language. Who is again Su, which H and S is always interchanged. Hindu and Sindhu, as I said. Hindu. So who is Su? And Su means good. Su Kanya, Sari Kanya. Right? So Su Mata, Saru thinking, good thinking. Su Ukta, Saru Bolvan in Sanskrit, same thing, Sukta. And Sukruta, Sara Kam, good deeds. So you can see similarities in 7,000-year-old Avesta language of Zoroastrians, Parsi people, and our Sanskrit language, how similar it is. And not only that, the philosophy, આપણે જેને ગુજરાતીમાં કહીએ છીએ, મન, વચન અને કાયા, mind, body. And that's God, Ahura Mazda. That's the picture of it. Right. Now, Egyptian God, those who have visited Egypt, especially Luxor, you will see lots of temples everywhere, especially many things in the Valley of Gods. They believe in sun god, and that god is called Ra. You might have seen temples dedicated to Ra, sun god. And there was one particular belief during that time, again, quite interesting. And I somehow think that the philosophy of karma has started there, maybe in some different form, but it's there. See the picture below. You can see a person who was dead before, and the sea has been brought for the judgment day. Now for the judgment day, there's a big scale weighing things. On one side, that person's heart has been placed. Because Egyptian people believe that it's the heart. There is no concept of soul. That it's your heart which does everything, thinks everything, everything happens because of the heart. So her heart has been placed on one side, and there is a feather on the other side. Now, feather represents truth and justice. It's extremely light. So it's been weighed. If this side, the side where the heart is heavier, that means person has accumulated karma, bad deeds. And if that side is heavier, feather is heavier than heart, that means the person can take her heart and move forward to another life. So reincarnation will start. But if the heart is heavier, then that strange animal will eat your heart, cover it. And that's the end of everything. No afterlife. And your pyramid and everything. So that's an interesting thing. I thought I'd share with you how everything started more than 7,000 years ago. Our own philosophy, our soul gets stayed, gets heavier, then it goes through cycle of birth and death in different forms. Now Hindu gods, again Hindus believe in sun. If you read the very first scripture, Rig Veda, it praises sun god. And it's the Gayatri mantra, the famous mantra, which people recite every day. Hindus more or less recite every day, Gayatri mantra. And what is Gayatri mantra? It praises sun, it worships sun god. In all the Hindu scriptures, like 4 Vedas, Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Athar Veda, Sam Veda, or Vedas, and lots of Upanishads, they praise sun god, Indra, Prajapati, Usha. These 4 were the main god. Usha is goddess, of course, yeah. They used to worship them. And there's a very beautiful sentence in Isha Upanishad, again, my favorite. Why it is my favorite, I'll tell you why. Ishavashyam idam sarvam yat kinch jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bhunjitaha ma bhedes kashyachittam. Ishavashyam idam sarvam. That bit is worth learning. And again the third phrase is also Ishavashyam. Everything here, all this is developed, is enveloped by the Supreme Being. That means the presence of Supreme Being is everywhere and in everything. Superficially, we might think that is not much here really. But again, see the philosophy. God is everywhere and in everything. That means everything is sacred. Every animal, every living being, every plant, everything. God is in everything, Supreme Being. And that's how the philosophy says, Isavashyam idam sarvam. The sky, the flowers, whatever you see, has been enveloped by all-pervading God. And again it says, there is see the third phrase, Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitaha. A golden sentence worth remembering in our life. Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitaha. If you want to enjoy something, give it up. What a contradictory thing to say, isn't it? But it has got deep meaning. Say if you want to enjoy the fragrance of beautiful flowers, what would you do? Pluck them and keep in your house? No. Go to a garden. Go to a garden and smell them. Flowers are all right there. You know. And if you want to enjoy something, enjoy it without any feelings of attachment whatsoever. No feeling of attachment. Whatever has been given by God, just have it. But tena tyaktena bhunjita. Give up and enjoy. He said it has got a deep meaning really. Yeah. More you think about it, more you will know what it means. So Hindu gods, how it started there. From the creation, there's one God, Almighty, Omniscient. But it has got three forms. The one is Brahma, Creator. The one in the middle is the one who sustains everything, keeps everything going. And the one at the end is Destroyer, Shiva. So it developed into three different forms. Trinity of gods, Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh. Again the Jain philosophy is said, Jains do not believe in God like Hindus do, but Jains do believe. There is a creation, there is a destruction, and there is a time in between, sustained period, period of maintenance or period of operation. So, Bhagavan Mahavir Swami, when he taught Agams to his disciples, he said three things. Upaneva, Vigaiva, Dhruva. Everything is being created, everything takes birth, then it remains, there is a lifespan for it, and then it gets destroyed. But Hindus have got three forms. But then idea of goddesses also came about. Lots of goddesses. I've just shown one goddess, Saraswati, goddess of wisdom, goddess of wealth, goddess which destroys things, goddess which kills demons and other things. And other gods which have got different forms. Some gods have got elephant head. This god has got monkey's face, Hanuman. So different, but the idea was there is God who did everything. And that's how you can respect all animals, all trees, everything around you. Because there is life everywhere, and there is divinity in each and everything. And the Shiva, I showed you Shiva, the god of destruction. There is another picture. Again, there is a particular interest in Shivas. Because Jains believe in Vrishabhadev Bhagavan. And some scholars think that Vrishabhadev Bhagavan, some scholars think that Vrishabhadev Bhagavan is same as Lord Shiva in Hinduism. Because Rushdie Bhagwan was sitting in the same posture. He had a bull as his symbol or as his vehicle, which Lord Shiva has got bull. The hair locks and all these things similar to Rushdie Bhagwan. And he was in Himalayas. Rushdie Bhagwan was in Himalayas, or at least attained Nirvana there. So some believe that Rushdie Bhagwan and Lord Shiva are same. But that's, of course, debatable, and the scholars can debate about that all the time. Now, Jain arguments about God. Jains believe in two things: Jiva and Ajiva, life and non-life. Very simple classification. There is nothing else in this universe. If there is nothing else, then is there creation? Is there a creator? So let's think about it. Jains, they question, and they said that, well, everything is automatic. There's jiva, sentient beings, there's matter, day and night happens, winter, spring, autumn, everything happens automatically. In Hindu philosophy, especially in Upanishad, they used to worship another goddess called Rita. Rita means Rutu. Rutu means climate. बराबर? और कैसे शिशिर ऋतु, वसंत ऋतु, all different ऋतु. So that original name was Rita. They used to worship that as well, because it goes in a cycle, isn't it? Summer, winter, winter, summer, and everything. So that's Rita. So Jain said it happens automatically. Summer comes after winter, and winter comes after summer, and all these things, day and night is all automatic. No one is responsible. There is no doer. And who has made all this? The earth, sun, moon, stars, etc. No one. Who made us? Again, it's an evolution. Right from what we call amoeba-like life to human beings. So is there a superhuman divine force behind all these things? Who created us? Who created this universe? So now Jain arguments are quite interesting. If God created the world, where was He before the creation? These are the Jain points of view, written by our acharyas. And thanks to one omniscient guru called Google. I got this. It was easy rather than typing everything. If God created the world, where was He before the creation? You say He was transcendent then and needed no support. Where is He now? How could God have made this world without any raw material? If you want to make something, if you want to make a pot, you need clay. So if you want to make this whole universe, you need some raw material. Where did He get all the raw material from? So there was no raw material. And if there was raw material, who created raw material? And so on and on. So it's an endless regression. If you declare that this raw material arose naturally, you fall into another fallacy. For the whole universe might thus have been its own creator. So if the raw material was there, then again the argument falls. If God created the world by an act of His own will, without any robot here, then it's just His will and nothing else. So altogether there are 11 to 12 points. Right, more. Have I started from number 2? Yeah. So number 1. Yeah, but we saw this, yeah. Right. 3. If we say ever perfect and complete, how could the will to create have actually? Now, we say that God is perfect, superhuman, divine being. So He should not have any desire, any will to do something. So if there is no will, no desire, then why would create something? Because it needs some sort of desire. ઈચ્છા હોય તો કરીએ ને આપણે કંઈ, નહીં તો આપણે કંઈ કરીએ નહીં. તો ભગવાનની એવી ઈચ્છા કેમ થઈ? ભગવાનને તો ઈચ્છા હોય નહીં. There's no desire to do anything. So why would He create this whole universe? If He is formless, actionless, and all-embracing, how could He have created the world? Such a soul devoid of all modality would have no desire to create anything. If He is perfect, what advantage would He gain by creating the imperfect universe? God is perfect. Just imagine, then why would He create imperfect thing? Because this world is imperfect, this universe is imperfect. Some are poor, some are rich, some are happy, some are miserable. There is inequality, there is no equality, right? Why would He create imperfect universe? If He created because of the karma of embodied beings, then He is not the Almighty Lord, but subordinate to something else. So again, if He had some karmas, He Himself had karma, then that means He wasn't really God. Some more arguments. If out of love for living beings and need of them He made the world, why did He not make creation only blissful, free from misfortune? As I said, by someone, some people are happy, some people are misfortunate. If He were transcendent, He would not create, for He would be free, nor if involved in transmigration, for then He would not be almighty. Thus, the doctrine that the world was created by God makes no sense at all. And God commits great sin in slaying the children who He Himself has created. If you see that He slays only to destroy human beings, why did He create such beings in the first place? Isn't it? If you think that everything is being done to destroy the bad forces, but then why would He create bad forces, evil things? So, these are the Jain arguments. So, Jain said that there is no creator. Everything has happened automatically. There is matter and spirit in this universe. And beginningless and everlasting. These things are. So there is no creator God. So, okay, that makes us non-believer, isn't it? Non-believer. We do not believe in God. And why there are more than 10,000 temples? And we go and worship, we go and bow down, we go and sing praises and do everything. So, when people say that, no, you do not believe in God, so what would you say? Answer is difficult, isn't it? On one hand, but then we say that our definition of God is quite different. In Christianity, Islam, Judaism, God means creator, and creator means God. But our definition and the Buddhist definition is quite different. Jain gods, Arihanta, Tirthankara, Siddha, they are all gods. Mainly Arihanta and Tirthankara, because when we go to a temple, we worship Tirthankara. So then, why Arihanta and Tirthankara are our gods? Why do we say that they are our gods? Why do we bow down to them? What they have done? That's the thing. What they have done. They must have done something. So when we say that they must have done something, they must have lived on this earth or somewhere. They must have achieved something. That's how we respect them, we praise them, we worship them. So our gods are gods who used to live or who lived on this earth or on another planet. Once they attained omniscience, Keval Gnana, infinite wisdom, and they attain nirvana. These are our goals. But it makes sense, isn't it? Because Jainism says that there is a spark of divinity in each one of us. We all have that potential, each one of us. And that's the beauty of our religion. Because it doesn't condemn you. It says that you carve your own path. You can be omniscient. You can attain Godhood by attaining nirvana, moksha. And that's what the religion, Jain religion, is all about. So Arihanta, the word itself, I know it's a basic thing you must have learned umpteen times, and comes from the word Arhat, means enlightened. Same word has been used by Buddhists. Buddha himself was also called Arhat. Mahavir Swami was called Arhat. And from that, the word Arihant has been coined. Arhat means enlightened ones. And Arihant, some people say Arihant means Ari plus Hant. Ari means enemy, and Hant means the one who destroys. The one who destroys his enemies is called Arihant. And we all know that our enemies are our inner passions, our anger, greed, jealousy, illusion. These are our enemies. Our raga and dvesha, that means our attachment and aversion. These are our enemies. So Arihant is the one who has acquired or attained victory over these inner enemies. And we worship Tirthankara. Again, who are our Tirthankaras? Mahavir Swami is Tirthankara, Adinath Bhagavan is Tirthankara, Parshnath Bhagavan is Tirthankara. But why they are called Tirthankaras? There is a slight difference between Arihanta and Tirthankara. આપણે ટેમ્પલમાં જઈએ તો we can say Mahavir Swami is Arihant, of course. Mahavir Swami is Tirthankara. Why is Tirthankara? Because he had done something more after becoming Arihant. After becoming enlightened one, he had done something more. What is that something more? He established a fourfold path, fourfold Sangh congregation involving lay women, monks and nuns, these four. And that fourfold congregation is called Tirth, and that is why they are called Tirthankar. The one who established Tirth is Tirthankar. And there are, of course, 24 Tirthankar in our present time cycle, so we worship them as our gods. And who are Siddhas then? Siddhas are liberated beings, pure soul. Arihanta and Tirthankars got body, they living. આપણે જે ટેમ્પલમાં વર્શિપ કરીએ છીએ મહાવીર સ્વામીને, એ કયા ફોર્મમાં વર્શિપ કરીએ છીએ? એમનું લિવિંગ ફોર્મ જે હતું એ એમનું બોડી છે એ વર્શિપ કરીએ છીએ, નોટ એઝ પ્યોર સોલ. એ રીતે બટ સિદ્ધ ઇઝ એ પ્યોર સોul. There is no form. You cannot take this picture or visualize it. It's just the Atma, soul. So Siddha is a pure soul. So, but when we say Navakara mantra, we always say Namo Arihantanam and Namo Siddhanam, both things, because we worship them. These are our gods. And of course we worship semi-gods. That's the influence. Lots of scholars say that influence of other religions. And that has happened in Buddhism as well. Pure Buddhism had no semi-gods. Especially Theravada Buddhism, people of Sri Lanka. They are most probably the original Buddhist people. They believe in what Lord Buddha taught them. But then Buddhism has changed, has gone through so many changes, from country to country, place to place, from time to time. So Buddhism nowadays is completely different. So the bigger section of Buddhism is a Mahayana path. And the Mahayana people believe in semi-gods and semi-goddesses. Lots of gods and other gods and goddesses have been included. Most famous is Avalokiteshvara. Long name. You might have seen statues of Avalokiteshvara in British Museum as well. Pragna Paramita and other things here. But Avalokiteshvara is the main thing. And goddesses, Tara and other things. So similarly, Jainism, there are lots of gods and semi-gods and goddesses. Some people say they have been invented afterward, but some people say that no, they were always there. And of course, in some of our scripture, they have been described, semi-gods and goddesses. And there are different gods, but goddesses. And why we are worshipping them? Because Arihanta and Tirthankara are Vitaraga gods. They have no attachment, no aversion. They would not fulfill your wishes. They can't give you anything. Well, your pure soul. That's why. But the other semi-gods and goddesses, they are capable of granting your wishes. They give you moons. So we worship them as well. And there are lots of semi-gods and goddesses. Each Tirthankar has got attendant god. Each Tirthankar has got attendant goddess. And there are Vidyadevis. There are gods of all directions. The 9 planets, so 9 gods, so to speak. If you study Moti Shanti, Privet Shanti, everything has been mentioned in these 9 planets, Kshatrapal gods, Tirthankars, mothers, everything. So these are gods and goddesses also we worship. But then there are more. We are not satisfied after that. So we have got other gods and goddesses, which in last 400-500 years, this has been started by our acharyas, like Ghantakarna Mahavir, Manibhadra Dada, Nakoda Bhairavji. You can see idols, murtis of these gods as well. Even in Canton Derasar, we have got Ghantakarna Mahavir and Manibhadra. These are somewhat newer gods. Yeah. Manibhadra Dada is not more than 400 years old. Ghantakarna Mahavir's worship started just 200 years ago. Nakoda Bhairav started in a place called Nakoda in Rajasthan. So these are again gods and goddesses. But that happens everywhere, especially in Indian philosophy. If you see Hindu religion, you know, you can say there are millions of gods. Each one of us is God. And new gods are being added. Strange but true. Do you know that when Christians started propagating Christianity in India, and they wanted to convert Hindus, whether this is not a good religion, you want to make them civilized, you want to make them Christian, and they said, this is a true God, Jesus Christ, you must worship. And Hindus said, all right. We have got photographs and idols of 25 gods in my house. I'll also keep Jesus Christ. And they did that. Jesus Christ was also placed. Yes, he's also one of the gods. But we are still Hindus. No problem. So in one way, Christians did not succeed in India. That's one of the main reasons. Because the Hindus say that, okay, our religion is all-encompassing religion. We will be living Jesus Christ as well. Because Hindus, they have started adding gods, you know. Now, last 200 years, you see Swaminarayan, Jalaram Baba, Satya Sai Baba, isn't it? For the new ones coming. But that again, in my opinion, maybe it's a beauty of Hinduism. Because we learn from everything, from everywhere, from every saint. I'm surprised that there are no temples of Mahatma Gandhi. That's perhaps a good thing. Yeah.
Because they're not creator gods.
No.
So they're some kind of divine beings that have some supernatural powers, is it? Or how do you define
Well, of course, they are not the creator, of course. Arinata and Tirthankars are not created gods, you know. But as I said, they are Yaksha and Yakshani or attendant god. See, there is one semi-god looking after its Tirthankara, yeah, semi-goddess. Like you say, Adinath Bhagavan, the goddess is Chakreshwari, right? So Chakreshwari is the attendant goddess of Adinath Bhagavan. And if you want to reach Adinath Bhagavan, you can also worship Chakreshwari Mata. It's like, I'll give you a crude example. If you want to go and see minister, you have to see his PA, private secretary, you know, and through him, you will be able to see the minister himself. So it's like this. You can worship Chakreshwari Mata, you can worship Padmavati Mata, the goddess of Parshvanath Bhagavan, you know, and they are capable of fulfilling your wishes. Because they are also divine beings. They have got supernatural powers too. Because they are not human beings. They have got supernatural powers. And we Jains believe that they fulfill our wishes. That's why you can see Padmavati Matas. There are lots and lots of temples of Padmavati as well. People worship Padmavati, you know. They have got great faith. And always faith is a great thing. You know, faith brings result. Yeah. So that's how we worship. Sorry,
heaven, change concept of heaven. Are they two separate things?
No, there are different types of Devaloka. There are Bhuvanpati gods. They live in dimensions. And there are Yantar gods. They live in different jungles and intermediate things. That's why Manibhadra Bhagavan says a Yantar god. Then there are Jyotish god, suns and stars and moons and Jyotish gods. And which is Vaimanic gods. There are 4 different types of gods. Vaimanic gods means those who travel in their aeroplanes, you know. Some gods have been described like that, Indra and others. So all these gods are, heaven is just a common word for all these things. They are in a different level of God. They are living there.
Is that the same for Yaksha then?
Yeah.
All the semi-gods that
They have got their different abodes.
Abodes in heaven.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But of course, they have got some kind of supernatural divine powers, and that's why we worship them.
One question. When Mahavira went on his spiritual path, he said the destiny is in your own hands. Somebody else cannot make your destiny. So by now introducing gods and semi-gods, aren't you bypassing Mahavira's original philosophy? That true salvation is your own true journey, to see truth yourself. Because Mahavira's truth was his truth. By having faith, you create fanatics, but to an extent, you're not doing anything yourself personally to see the truth yourself. So unless you experience it yourself, how can faith transform you? I find it difficult.
Yeah, the true religion, from the Nischayanayak point of view, you know, you have to worship Tirthankara only, and worship again is follow his path.
No, but I'm saying differently. I'm saying worship, it doesn't transform you.
Yeah.
You actually have to go yourself to understand, experience the truth yourself. Otherwise, worshiping a Tirthankara, how does it transform you, really?
Worship we practice is like a stepping stone.
Okay.
You know, yeah. It's a stepping stone. You have to begin somewhere, and by praying, by following the path, or by doing upvas or other things, you know, you purify yourself. Your mind is fixed at certain level, at certain point in his philosophy, in his words and everything. You are engrossed in it. And then, it's only a ladder. You can abandon that ladder. But the ladder of worshipping and other things, you know, and temple worship and rituals and all that. But it does serve as a ladder. It does serve as a boat to cross the river. But of course, we do not have to kick all the time. But we do not have to worship the ladder. We have to worship the higher thing. So we have to follow the path. But to make it easier, religion also says that there is no harm in worshipping seven gods. And there is no harm in doing all the rituals and other things, you know.
Mahavira never practiced any of this.
Mahavira, we cannot compare ourselves.
Yeah, I'm saying that's his true philosophy.
Yeah.
His true philosophy was not to believe, because he disabandoned all Hindu versions of, gods actually are, like you just mentioned, gods, semi-gods, it's a Hindu context, right?
Yes.
Because somebody can bring you benediction, somebody can transform you. But Mahavira said, it cannot happen. You have to transform yourself. That's what I'm trying to say, a distinction. Semi-gods to me sounds a bit dangerous, that we are
bypassing transform ourselves.
Yeah.
That's no doubt about this. But how do we transform? What level we are right now, that's what we have to think. I mean, I can say that, why should we drink boiled water? Mahavir came to him. And Patel, he was living in the jungle for 12.5 years. Where he was doing this, how he was doing upvasa, how he was doing pratikrama. Right? But at what level he was living, what state of mind he was living, that's completely different. And we cannot imagine. So our level is completely different. We are at that level. Mahavir Swami was at that probably much higher level, on higher plane. So we cannot really compare these two things, our life and his life. You know. For us, we have to go step by step, step by step. We are on these 14 steps of Gunasthanaka, where we are at the bottommost point. And to start somewhere, even the temple helps, the worship helps, you know, because it transforms your mind. We are not capable of jumping from here to there. So we have to go step by step. But the true path is just follow his path. That's what should happen.
To me, it seems almost that the introduction of the semi-gods just shows the true nature of human beings and all that. We all yearn for believing in a supernatural being, that there is an inherent need in human beings to have something which is controlling them, can bestow things on them, to make things happen for them if they pray hard enough. And that's one of the reasons why it's been introduced. And that's why other religions, as you say, Western religions are also successful.
What I think is that basically our acharyas thought that we human beings are quite weak, you know. Because we are householders, we go through lots of difficulties, ups and downs in our lives, you know, and we need support. If you are going through a bad phase in your life, you always try to find some sort of support, you know, some sort of help, some sort of guidance. And say, man who is terminally ill, how can you console him? Say that, oh, you'll be all right, God will help you, these other things. So that's how, this idea, you cannot go to hospital and tell this man, that, no, there is no God, our God does not help, don't pray, all these things, you know. You have to say that, no, God will help. And that is what our acharyas realized, that because we are quite weak, there has to be something that helps you. Now this something are semi-gods and semi-gods. And not only that, asking from Tirthankar Bhavanti as well, that please God give me something, give me that, give me that. And remember, all our big stotra, like Bhaktamar Stotra and Bhosabgram Stotra and all these things, they've been composed by great acharyas like, what's name? Mantum Suri, that's a Bhaktamar Stotra. Bhadrabahu, that's a Bhosabgram Stotra. Now they were great scholars. They knew Tirthankar cannot give you anything. They won't give you anything. Yet, we are asking for material things in these poems. We are requesting, oh God, please grant me that, grant me good health, grant me wealth, prosperity. I want to be free from all the fears and all these things because of our basic weakness. And I think again in my mind, there's nothing wrong with it. And that's how we also pray the semi-gods and semi-goddesses. And again, that's quite okay in my opinion. You know? Because I see people coming to temple. Their faith is strengthened, but not only that, they acquire courage to do something. They acquire confidence to fight something or to achieve something in their life. That's what happens. And they tell me, That's what they do. That's what the advantage for them is coming to temple and doing all these things, you know. Mm. So yes, on one hand, Jainism is pure religion which does not believe in creator, which does not believe in all these things, but on the other hand, we believe in lots of supernatural things. And there are lots of things which science cannot explain, you know. A lot of things happen in our life which logic, simple logic cannot explain, science cannot explain. I myself have seen lots of things happening which
In fact, I know people who have had cancer, who have cured, or who say they have been cured just by reciting Uvasagaram Stotra, Pani, Uvasagaram Mantri,
Has happened,
Pani, Rab Kayu Che, and they've been cured, and they've talked at great lengths to me. And whether it is faith, whether it is the power of the words, or whatever it is, but something has happened to them. It's good.
yeah, and these examples have been given by me in my book as well, you know, this notion of my book. But this happens, there are things which we cannot explain by some scientific tests and other things, you know, things. I was talking to that time I said, बात करते थे ना, तो जब मैं ऑक्सीजन बात करी थी, ये बात करी थी, we don't know how these things happen, you know, I've seen so many things, yeah, in my life.
Very early on, we talked about that early human beings worship the sun, the moon. In Jainism, we believe that the sun itself is a soul. Do we not? And the moon is a soul. All the water itself, all the water on the earth is a soul. So maybe there was something very innate about those human beings worshipping the sun and the moon, because they maybe sensed that it itself there was something spiritual there.
Maybe that's the idea. But somehow all philosophies, you know, merge in some sort of way in worship practices, in philosophical ways, as I said, karma, you know, in Jain and ancient Egypt things and all these things. So, all right, I think what was my time is over.
I've been watching the program for how the universe works. It's very interesting. You can even download the iPlayer and watch them. Sort of about the beginning of how the universe started. And one of the things is we can know how it works, but we cannot know why it is working.
So I got something.
So this is the whole question. Like even like Marconi, when he invented the radio and everything, he himself was saying, I know how it is working, but why is the radio working? I don't know. So there is something there.
Some sort of divine program.
Yes.
Okay. In Hindu philosophy, it's called Leela. Bhagavan means Leela. Leela means it's all a big stage and everything is being played, you know. Yeah. Okay, thanks very much.